Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast, The Things We Live For, Part 2, Family. Returning to this series is a returning of our attention to the things that make life worth living. Let's focus on the positives, and escape, at least for a couple of weeks, from the depressing drama that the world relentlessly produces. This week's topic seems to blow up every time anyone so much as gives it the side eye. So, if I too am drug under by the fearsome taboo of unmentionables, by the thought that family is good, or at least is supposed to be good, well, enjoy the articles I left behind. And someone will undoubtedly try to riddle out why I even took this subject on in the first place. I'll save them the time and just tell you, I took this subject on because we are all born alone and we all die alone. But human beings aren't built to live alone. We spend our lives accumulating things and winning battles, whether figurative or literal. And the moment we die, we lose it all. Everything we used up our life working for. We can't take anything with us. Literally, since Genesis, mankind has echoed the sentiment, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. All we are left with in the end, all our loved ones are really left with too after we're gone, are the memories. We will have absolutely no control, or even a say, in how we're remembered. Think about that for a moment. Let it sink in. In a world that insists that we all declare our own identities to the rest of the world, who must accept and even celebrate said identity without any reciprocal input based on how we are seen by others outside of ourselves, we are sold the idea that an uncontaminated purity of our own exclusive vision of ourself sits at the apex of society, like a golden calf of our own making. One that no one else can desecrate with their unworthy touch. Yet the very best they can offer is to keep this the status quo for one lifetime, for as long as you're breathing. After that, your identity becomes public property for all the rest of time. After that, you can be remade into anyone, by anyone, as society chooses. An evil monster, a frigid prude, a despicable hypocrite, a cruel dictator. Anything. They can twist and distort even the truth without real resistance. They are allowed to tell outright lies and call it my truth, and you get zero say. If you are remembered at all, it will be in the way that others choose to remember you. And no one said that karma ends with life. If you go around judging people from the past, whether historical or personal, by your own higher, purer standards, and find everyone to be lacking, good luck to you on your own legacy when it's in the hands of people just like you. In fact, that's a good standard for us all to judge ourselves by. If this was someone in history, instead of the familiar person living in my own head, and I had only their actions to go off of, not knowing their thoughts, feelings, or motives to take into account, what kind of person would I conclude I was? Or how easily could my story be twisted to make me look evil and condemnable? If someone else told me who I had been, that awful distorted version, and everything personal in my knowledge of myself was removed from that accusation. Would I believe and even repeat that slander about myself, as we often do about historical figures, without bothering to look into it at all ourselves? We just bypass all questioning and go straight to believe and repeat. So unimportant are the perceived reputations of others. Would I want someone to have higher standards than that, and maybe a bit more understanding of my own intentions, if it was my memory being smeared? Do I live up to treating others the way I would want to be treated in regard to the memory of others? If not, well, karma's a real bitch. Take Thomas Jefferson, for example. A brave man, building a new life and a new civilization in a new and hostile world. A man who did well for himself and acquired a luxurious home and a piece of land that he could call his own, that actually belonged to him and his family after him. A man who knew that history is written by the victors, and if he participated in a revolution that failed, he would go down in history not as a hero, but as a traitor. A man who penned something as glorious and eternally eloquent as the Declaration of Independence, a document that stood the test of time as a beacon to the rest of the world of liberty itself. A man who fought for religious freedom as a fundamental right, despite not being devoted personally to any real faith. A man who wanted to see the end of slavery, who opposed it as immoral, even in an age when many openly did not, despite his failure to live up to his own standards personally, as many of us often do when it comes to our own moral standards. A man who became President of the United States. After living a life that in so many ways was exemplary and vastly impressive, would he have anticipated having his legacy reduced to two facts? A slave owner who fathered children on his slave? Would he have foreseen his reputation being smeared by far lesser men, small and petty men, that would remove his statue from the halls of government he helped to build? How do you honestly think your reputation will fare if that's what they did to his? Do you have as many impressive contributions as he did that you've made to the world, that changed the course of history for the better? Have you proportionally done less evil to the people around you than he did? If this is his legacy 250 years later, what chance do you or I have of being remembered well, even a century from now, with future standards of morality that we can't even comprehend yet? Will karma be kind to us based on our own treatment of others' memories? If we're being honest with ourselves and sincere in our assessment of ourselves, that thought should scare everyone. If it doesn't, I would venture to guess that you are not being very self-aware right now. So let's attempt to move forward with an impersonal honesty and think about a few things objectively. Then we can all arrive at whatever conclusions we each choose to. You might think I would be wise enough to let the subject of family lie after what happened to Harrison Butker's reputation recently. But I have less to lose than he does, so here we go. Let's take a quick look at what happened to his reputation and why, before moving on to the heart of the matter and discussing the family unit itself. Butker is an NFL kicker who also happens to be a devout Catholic. As a devout Catholic, on his own time, not on the field where he is paid to represent the NFL. He was invited to speak at the commencement ceremony for a Catholic university. As you might imagine, most students who would choose to go to a Catholic university, like Butker, are probably pretty committed to the teachings of Catholicism. It was these students his remarks were addressed to. Yet a few remarks from the middle of his speech went viral, and the reaction online and on ESPN was absolutely rabid. Quote, "For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now about to cross the stage and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today, enabled to be the man I am, because I have a wife who leaned into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in class back in middle school, choked up, would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker. This was followed by applause and cheers, including from the women he was addressing. Okay, before breaking this down, I need to make one quick point. I do not admire people who, quote, stand up for other people that haven't asked them to do so. If a person who is in a racial minority says that they've been discriminated against and stands up for themselves, and you stand beside them, that is admirable. If a woman has been sexually assaulted and is fighting for justice, and you stand with her, that is also admirable. If a person is not upset by something that happened to them, and they are not asking for anyone to make them into the mascot for someone else's cause, and yet those someones decide to play white knight and ride in to force their activism onto others, all in their own name, that is not admirable. To the best of my knowledge, none of the Catholic girls in this graduating class objected to Harrison Butker's remarks. So when ESPN commentators condemned him instead of just covering the game, when comedians insulted his wife, not even sticking to the man himself, and when internet mobs, quote, defended those college girls by attacking Butker and demanding his job, that is not something that qualifies as admirable in my mind. That being said, let's consider his actual words, the ones that caused so much trouble. He said that many, not all, but many Catholic girls who are so Catholic that they attended a Catholic university are probably more excited about becoming wives and mothers than the level of their excitement about having careers. That is probably true of these particular Catholic girls. He didn't say that they couldn't or even that they shouldn't have careers. He didn't say that all other women around the globe should feel the same way that most of these girls do. He called the role of wife, mother, and homemaker one of the most important titles of all. He didn't even say that it was the most important title of all, which he certainly could have argued, as the hand that rocks the cradle truly does rule the world in a very real way, shaping the future, the next generation, including its leaders, who will one day control the world. And it is an extremely difficult job to do well. I think we can all agree on that. But he didn't even make those assertions. He just said that it was one of the most important jobs. Do you really disagree with that? Motherhood doesn't even qualify as one of the most important roles. And for these comments, he broke the internet. People have been trying to get him fired, for his family to lose their income and his entire life be permanently destroyed over these entirely benign comments. Let's think about that for a moment. Even if he had said something that was truly condemnable, the normal reaction to a ludicrous or even an evil assertion is to point out that it's wrong and then to move on. Vitriol isn't really required because the point is so obvious that no one is taking it seriously. When Nazis insisted on marching through the Jewish neighborhood of Skokie, they were allowed to do it. No one liked it, but no one was actually worried because we knew everyone hated these guys. They were unanimously condemned, and their ideology refuted, and people moved on, because no one was interested in joining their ranks. Everyone already understood that they were bad people with bad ideas. Everyone felt disgust and disdain for them, but vitriol wasn't necessary because of that very fact. So what does all the vitriol in this case mean? It means that some people feel very, very threatened by very benign realities. Only when something hits a nerve does it generate the desire to completely destroy someone just for having a different opinion than their own. It may seem normal to want to, quote, destroy an opponent in today's world, but it's actually a very abnormal reaction. It indicates a deeply unhealthy mind and a very unstable emotional core. It's an irrational level of reaction to have. The fact that this subject always seems to strike nerves only confirms its significance in today's world. Some people adamantly defend those sentiments as sacred, while others treat the idea as though it's equal to the propaganda of the KKK. And both sides condemn the other in the strongest terms possible, completely dehumanizing them for their differing beliefs. Why? It's such a benign subject. Why does it consistently generate this reaction these days? One of the most vehement reactions I ever received online was linked to this very subject. I watched a YouTube video where someone was reacting to an infamous TikTok. In the TikTok, a girl bragged about the life she was able to lead because she did not have children. She spoke of going to a concert the previous night, sleeping in late, having no obligations, and planning to binge watch TV all day. Then the reactor pointed out that this was actually a very sad and empty life, one without any real purpose or meaning, one that was entirely self-centered, and one that would result in a feeling of emptiness at the end of the day, and indeed at the end of one's life. She specifically said that one did not necessarily have to become a mother to avoid that, but that some sense of purpose beyond sleeping half the day away and an ambition to binge-watch TV was necessary to have a meaningful life. I posted a comment agreeing with this view. I said that there were many ways to have a meaningful life, but that some sense of purpose beyond ourself was necessary to generate contentment and therefore happiness. I said that a life completely devoted to just oneself and the indulgence of one's meaningless and fleeting whims was both unhealthy for society as a whole and for any individual who lived this way permanently, as it would mean eventually dying alone and being mostly unmissed when they did. I received an outraged reply asking why anyone should care what was good for society. I stated that we all have to care about what is good for society because we all have to live in that society. I used the example that if our society degenerated into a world of cannibal serial killers, that would indeed be a bad thing. That would be the concern of everyone in that society, as we would all wind up murdered and eaten by our neighbors. The commenter's outrage only grew, and she accused me of comparing a choice to not have children to the choice to become a cannibal serial killer. I patiently explained that I was making no such comparison. We had changed subjects. She had changed the subject by asking why anyone should care about society. My comment was an answer to that question, not to a totally separate question about the virtues of becoming or not becoming a mother. I restated, for what seemed the millionth time, that there were many ways to have a purpose in life, that motherhood was only one of them, and that my only point was that purpose was necessary for happiness, and that a life that centered solely on oneself would not satisfy that need. The ability, or perhaps the willingness of this individual to stop primarily focusing on winning and demonstrating their faux outrage left her unable to follow a rational argument or distinguish between separate points. Her only interest was to accuse the original reactor in the video, and by extension me, of wanting to force all women to become mothers and live out the handmaid's tale. An entirely irrational conclusion to come to based off of either of our comments, which specifically addressed many alternatives for finding a sense of purpose apart from motherhood. Since this subject always generates these reactions, and since I've already experienced the lack of rationality attached to it, why am I writing an entire article on it? Because it's clearly an important and personal issue, one way or another, to pretty much everyone in society. And therefore, rational people need to make rational arguments about it. If some people like that, great. I'll be thrilled. If some people hate that, that really has no actual effect on my day-to-day life. The facts are that society as a whole had fewer problems when nuclear family units were the norm. Some of the problems they did have, like racism, were vast and malignant. But we have vast and malignant problems today. We just have more of them than back then, although arguably less severe in degree. And there's absolutely no reason why valuing the family unit would mean that you also had to value racism, just because they came from the same era. It's not an all or nothing deal. You are allowed to take the good and leave the bad, The two aren't chained together. Someone recently commented that in the Jim Crow era, families were the norm, including the black community. During this era, only about 20% of black children were being raised by single mothers. Now, about 70% of these children are. There were a few pathetic, though mostly unsuccessful attempts to construe this as some sort of longing for the days of Jim Crow. But obviously, having two-parent households is likewise not an issue that is dependent on Jim Crow oppression. Merely referencing the time period as the era of Jim Crow does not mean that the subject you are raising is built on a return to Jim Crow laws, as any rational person can conclude on their own without my help. The only people who pretend otherwise are hustlers, trying to sell snake oil in the profitable business of divisiveness. But people are getting tired of it, and fewer people are listening every day. The facts are that stats consistently show, in irrefutable numbers, that children who grow up in homes with both parents do have many advantages. They are less likely to get involved in drugs by a significant amount. They are less likely to go to prison or commit crimes by a significant amount. They are less likely to end up as single parents themselves by a significant amount. That doesn't mean it never happens. It does. Someone raised in a home with both their mother and father may indeed grow up to commit crimes one day or become a drug addict. Every stat has exceptions. Nothing is universally true. Stats are about likelihoods, not certainties. Children raised by only one parent are consistently at a higher risk for those things. Once again, it doesn't mean that every child from a single-parent home will grow up to be a criminal or an addict. It means they are at a higher risk for that, statistically. These stats are unpopular in certain circles because of the claim that it will make children who grew up with only one parent feel as though they missed out on something, and it will make single mothers feel guilty. I don't necessarily agree with that idea, that everyone is so irrational that a stat which might apply to them is going to seriously impact their view of themselves. If a child grows up with a single mother, but it was a loving and nurturing home that supported them in becoming the best person they could be, and they read a stat that says other children in similar circumstances face disadvantages, I don't see why that would make them suddenly feel bad about missing out on something in their own upbringing. But even if I'm wrong, and it is true that these stats make some people feel as though they missed out, they did. And that's sad. Not talking about it doesn't erase it. We all learn that in therapy, that these things need to be dug up and dealt with in order to move on, that that's the healthy way to do it. It's detrimental to stuff it down into some dark inner place and try to ignore it. And it doesn't work. Additionally, if a single mother realizes that being a single mother puts her kids at a statistical disadvantage, let's even assume it was through no choice of her own. Let's say she was widowed. I guess it's possible that that statistic might make her feel bad. But if it also gives her the information to do all she can to compensate for the situation by bringing in other male role models, grandfathers or uncles or good friends of the deceased father, then even if the stat made her feel bad temporarily, which probably indicates she would have worried about this and felt bad about it anyway, if her awareness led her to compensate for it, to give her children a better outcome, Wouldn't her temporary sad feelings be worth it? Stats also consistently show us that men in committed, married relationships live longer and are at significantly lower risk for suicide than divorced men or lifelong bachelors are. And that most parents view having their children as the most meaningful, albeit hardest, thing they did with their life. But what if saying these things might make people who are single or don't have children of their own feel bad? Once again, in cases where that is true, they probably already feel bad about that. It's not like they didn't notice they were single until we brought it up. So staying hands off about the subject doesn't end up sparing them anything. Secondly, we know from the stats that most women who are childless did not plan on or want to be so. Again, I said most, not all. And the majority of those women will regret the fact that they never had children, as reported by themselves. I empathize with them. I'm one of them. I never wanted to be childless. I wanted to be a mother more than anything else in the world. Watching friends and siblings have children that I wanted to have and didn't, through no choice of my own, was excruciating. Then watching younger women do the same thing, cousins and nieces, as my chance passed me by, rubbed salt in the wound every time. Seeing women like drug addicts who didn't want to be mothers, who weren't trying to become mothers, who had no intention of trying to be good mothers to their sweet babies. To see them being blessed with children that I so desperately wanted, only to turn around and abandon them, was very hard to understand and come to grips with. I don't take the feelings that anyone in that situation has lightly. My own feelings on the subject were insurmountable for a long time, for decades full of pain. And none of that changes the truth of the matter. Yes, there are other ways to contribute and find purpose in life. Yes, anyone who doesn't want to be a parent shouldn't become one, for the child's sake as much as for their own. Yes, not everyone has the choice to get married and become parents, even if they want to. And none of that changes the fact that statistically, that is the route by which most people will find meaning. We need to stop being terrified of the truth. It is what it is. It doesn't apply to everyone. That's what the word most means. And it shouldn't be forced on anyone who doesn't want it, but it still remains the truth. To be terrified of it and enraged at the truth is a sign of something deeply unhealthy in individuals and in society as a whole. My mother and I spent a lot of time looking into our family's Sicilian heritage. We scoured Ancestry.com. We went through family photos and records. We looked up documents in courthouses and uncovered more than one family skeleton. We went to Ellis Island, and I stood on the very first piece of American soil that my ancestor did. It was one of the most powerful moments of my life. We even fulfilled a lifelong dream of going to the San Gennaro Festival in Little Italy in New York. What can I say? We're big fans of the Godfather movies. And yes, they are the best films ever made, at least the first two. I won't debate that. It's just a fact. We also watched documentaries on the mass migration of Italian immigrants to America at the turn of the century. In the course of all this, we learned about a tiny town in Pennsylvania called Roseto. It was once the center focus of a 1964 study to uncover why its residents had such an unaccountably low rate of heart disease and death. By all logic, this should not be the case. Italians live for carbs. I know this. I am one. We eat all the wrong things. Pasta, rich sauces, fattening desserts. We love them all. Yet people in this town were inexplicably living longer. Rosetta was founded in 1912 and remained almost exclusively Italian-American for 4 generations. And though that is no longer true, once a year people have come back for a reunion known as the Big Time for more than 95 years. Rosetto gave the nation a different picture of Italian family life than the notorious crime family imagery that was popular in the 1960s, and still is. Researchers from the University of Oklahoma conducted a heart study into why the residents of this town were living longer and having fewer heart attacks and not getting heart disease. It made no sense. But maybe, if they could figure it out, this little town would hold the key for everyone else. So doctors descended on the town, asking hundreds of questions of every resident willing to participate. Questions about their habits, lifestyles, and diet. Quote, "We ate everything wrong, but we liked it." They said it was wrong. We didn't know it was wrong. Spaghetti's not the best thing for you all the time, you know. But I tell you, if I'm going to go with a meatball in my mouth. The study revealed a diet that was high in both fat and cholesterol. So what gives? The results were actually groundbreaking. These people weren't dying of heart attacks because they weren't stressed. They felt safe and familially secure. They weren't afraid of old age because they knew they would go on living with their families. They knew they weren't going to starve, even if hard times came, because all their neighbors had a garden, and the sense of community and communal goodwill was strong. Doctors concluded that despite doing all the wrong things, just look at how they live. They know how to live. They live around the family. This is still referred to as the Rosetto effect. A socially cohesive community with tight bonds centered on family is protected health-wise and in the longevity of their residents to inexplicable degrees. These are people who had immigrated from the other side of the world. Over 4 million people came with nothing and started from nothing. They were openly discriminated against. They got only the most dangerous, lowest-paying jobs. And once the idea of the mafia was introduced via New Orleans newspapers, Southern Italian-American immigrants were mistrusted and viewed as criminal by their very race. My own great-great-great-grandfather, Giuseppe, spoke of having to carry a gun with him everywhere as he worked in the fields of Mississippi. But Italian-American communities were also tightly bonded to each other. This had started before immigration, with a mistrust of government and police in their own country, one they carried with them to their new home. This unfortunately left them easy prey for the Black Hand and other mafia groups or families. But it gave us, their descendants, a strong family structure that outlasted many others. Unfortunately, it is also starting to die out with total assimilation. There was an old expression back in Italy that the very air in America weakens the Italian family. It wasn't the air, it was the ideology. Other Americans thought of Italian immigrants as dangerous, in a criminal sense. But Italian immigrants also had a lot of anxiety about losing their essential tight-knit family life to assimilation to the American way of thinking. Some grew so concerned about it that they returned to southern Italy and Sicily, places they had left because of famine. Those who remained struggled to balance becoming fully American, which they deeply desired to do, with a desire to preserve their cultural values and keep them from disappearing into the melting pot. My own great-great-grandfather, Antonino, refused to teach his children, the first generation of my family born in America, the Sicilian dialect, proudly saying that they were Americans, and Americans spoke English. Their strong family ties outlived many other cultures, but ultimately they too would fail. As the descendants of Roseto, Pennsylvania, became more American and less Italian with each passing generation, they spread out and moved away from family and their values. And Roseta's heart stats began to match those of the rest of the country. If you're interested in more information on this study, I highly recommend the 2015 documentary, The Italian Americans by PBS. We see the same thing happening in real time after Starlink provided the internet to a remote tribe in the Amazon rainforest called the Marabou people last September. It's a community of about 2,000 people living alongside the Atui River. We've all seen the spike in depression and suicide among young people since smartphones became commonplace for children in 2012. We've seen the effects of social contagion spread rapidly to devastating effects. But it only took 9 months for the effects of the internet to show up in the heart of the Amazon. And unlike in the USA, there are no comorbidity factors. So we can say that the changes are the result of the internet. The only thing that has changed in the village is access to the online world. One villager told the Times, quote, "When it arrived, everyone was happy. But now things have gotten worse. Young people have gotten lazy because of the internet. They are learning the ways of the white people. But please don't take our internet away." That really says everything about the addictiveness of the little devices in our hands. The internet is terrible. It's destroying us, and we hate it. But please don't take it away. We desperately need it because we're hopelessly addicted to it. The Times reported that it was a common sight to see teenagers glued to their phones, group chats full of gossip, addictive social networks, online strangers, violent video games, scams, misinformation, and minors watching porn. The elders have had to restrict access to the internet to 2 hours in the morning, 5 hours in the evening, and all day Sunday, because it was interfering to a dangerous degree with even life-sustaining activities like hunting and gathering. It took only part of a single year for a remote village in the Amazon with very sporadic contact to the outside world to end up looking like an airport terminal with everyone glued to their phones. And it's reassuring to know that even a remote and isolated tribe who only rarely encounter outsiders have picked up via the internet that they should despise white people as entirely useless with no redeeming qualities. One village leader named Alfredo told the Times, "Everyone is so connected that sometimes they don't even talk to their own family." He added that young men were becoming more sexually aggressive in the tribe's previously chaste culture, which didn't even permit kissing in public. He says that kids are sharing pornography in group chats, and he worries that they will start mimicking what they see online. Another villager, a female leader named Tomase, added, "Some young people maintain our traditions. Others just want to spend the whole afternoon on their phones." Anoka reports that the technology has also saved lives by giving them quicker access to medical care in emergencies, but conceded that productivity in the village has plummeted. Quote, "It changed the routine so much that it was detrimental. In the village, if you don't hunt, fish, and plant, you don't eat." It is changing the type of ambitions that young people in the village have as well. One 15-year-old girl now dreams of traveling the world and seeing the places she sees online. Another girl wants to become a dentist. There's nothing wrong with that, Broadening one's horizons and wanting to leave a primitive life is understandable. But the downside of that trade may not be fully understood by the individuals making it. And it does also mean the death of the tribe's entire way of life. If all its young people leave, abandoning the elderly and their families, the village will die. But they already know there's no going back. Quote, "We can't live without the internet," they admit. The internet has, for this tribe, been a cataclysmic event, one it does not appear they will survive. It seems that their way of life is doomed to collapse, having now joined the digital age. Apparently, it takes only a few weeks for human beings to become so dependent on the internet that they neglect even previously strong relationships and responsibilities that are necessary to their own survival. Even understanding objectively how detrimental both of these things are to their society, and despite tensions over how best to handle and regulate these side effects, they are already hopelessly addicted and entirely dependent on the internet. Even as they complained about the impact to life-sustaining activities like planting and harvesting, even as they noted the never-before-seen sexual aggression among a previously chaste youth, now hopelessly addicted to pornography, even knowing it will mean the end of their civilization, they repeatedly added desperate pleas to be, quote, allowed to keep the source of their own destruction. It's a textbook addict. The internet has similarly restructured our own culture, society, families, and our very lives. There's no debating this. You see it everywhere you go. People cannot survive even a few seconds at a stoplight without pulling out their phone. You see it every time a child has to be given an obnoxiously loud device in a public place like a restaurant or waiting room, or else subject everyone there to a deranged tantrum. You see it every time family members who are sitting in the same room, on the same couch, choose to text each other rather than look each other in the eye and have an actual conversation. You see it in people who pay a not insignificant amount of money in an increasingly expensive world to go to a movie theater, and while watching a blindingly fast-paced plot full of action scenes, which they are paying their hard-earned money to do, they cannot resist dividing their attention, pulling out their phones to provide themselves with a simultaneous alternate source of entertainment. Name even one society or group of individuals, such as a family, who has the internet that has not had their life completely recentered around it. And who among us does not feel more isolated, alone, unhappy, depressed, and hopeless, with a bleaker outlook on life and the world as a result? It really does become the focal point of our lives and the primary lens through which we begin to view the world and each other. Dr. Phil recently promoted a documentary on Paramount Plus called Pillowcase Murders. There are 27 known victims of Billy Shemirmir. That's Jeffrey Dahmer, who killed 17 known victims, and Ted Bundy numbers, who killed 30 known victims. Shemirmir stalked the Dallas area unsuspected, because unlike other serial killers who tend to have a sexual component to their motivation, his motive was robbery, and he stalked the elderly. Walmart was his hunting ground, and he followed lone elderly shoppers home. Many of his victims were living in retirement villages with security guards. He returned multiple times posing as a maintenance man, even after being caught and banned from one property. He smothered his victims with a pillow, which left no suspicious cause of death. And because his victims were elderly, deemed to have led long, full lives, no one was interested enough to wonder if something unnatural was happening to them, despite the pattern of unexpected deaths in these retirement homes. Their families now live with unbearable guilt that their loved ones left this world through violence, with their last moments being ones of terror. The number of Americans over 65 is going to increase by 50% to 82 million by 2050. I will join them around that same time. When will you? If you were born in 1985, you will be 65 in 2050. So go from there. We don't have enough young people to care for that many elderly people, either as workers funding Social Security, or in the more direct way of people employed in industries that care for the elderly. According to the National Council on Aging, 1 in 10 people over the age of 60 in America have experienced some type of elderly abuse. Some estimates say that as many as 5 million seniors are abused every single year. Many people have a parent or a grandparent in independent or assisted living facilities. And most of us will one day end up living in these facilities as well. That's reality. Even those fortunate enough to have in-home care are often abused. These headlines are far from uncommon. We all see them. Recently, 2 assisted living employees were so brazen in their abuse of their patients that they actually live streamed their abuse of an elderly woman with dementia. They recorded themselves as they mocked and degraded her, laughing into the camera as she screamed, and they threatened to lock her in the closet. They were thankfully arrested and convicted and sent to prison, but among those who saw the video, I don't think I'm alone in believing that prison was too good for them. This could, God forbid, one day be each of us. If you want to know that your parents or grandparents aren't being abused by strangers, you can choose to do what many people have done for generations and have them live with you. A multi-generational home is an enormous gift to both your parents and to your children. And for many people, though it requires definite sacrifices, it is an entirely feasible option. And as I noted before, karma's a bitch. If you don't believe in karma, or in reaping what you sow, you might think of it in a more practical term. If you accidentally teach your kids that it's okay for you to put grandma in a home, rather than be inconvenienced and have your life truly and significantly disrupted and altered, then it's very probable that they will take that lesson to heart and feel that it is entirely reasonable to put you in a home rather than be inconvenienced and have their own life disrupted and altered. I'm not saying this is always possible in cases of advanced dementia or serious health problems, but for many people who are not in those situations, it is possible if they choose it. It's not easy. Choosing it will be a hard path, but it's a choice that is an option for most people. 2 of my brothers were put out of the room they shared and lived on the living room sofa for a year when my great-grandmother moved in with us. We were able to move to a new home that had enough bedrooms for all, and she continued to live with us for 15 years. It was not always easy, not by any means. My mother had health problems of her own and a large family to care for, the children of which had health problems to varying degrees of their own. And her grandmother was not an easy person to care for most of the time. Still, she did it and set the example for each of us. There's no guarantee that your kids will follow your example, but your odds are definitely better than if you set the example of always putting your own feelings first. You can choose to do that. I'm not condemning you if you do. I don't know your circumstances. I'm not pretending I do. I'm pointing out that at every juncture of life, we have the choice to do what our heart tells us is right, and that things usually turn out better for everyone involved, including ourselves, when we listen to that voice. Pointing out the realities that I have today isn't meant to discourage you, to make you feel even more hopeless or surrender even further to the inevitable bleakness. On the contrary, it's meant to remind you that it isn't inevitable. You have a choice. It may not be an enviable one, but you do have it. In the words of Douglas Murray, of whom I am an enormous supporter, life isn't just given to you. Life is something you have to fight for. Fighting is hard. It requires an enormous amount of effort. It's uncertain and risky, and it requires a constant ability to adapt and reassess. You don't want to struggle that way? You don't have the energy or endurance to live that way? Okay. Really? I mean that. Okay. I get it. I have no magic wand that can give you result A from path B. I understand if you choose path B. I get it. I just can't change the fact that that will lead you to result B. I didn't make the rules of reality. I can only point out that there is still a path A to take if you want it. The choice is yours. If you want to live a good life, either you fight for it or you expect someone else to. How does one lead a good life? I don't even mean morally good right now. I mean a life that you would call good, think of as a happy one. I agree with Douglas. Quote, by leading what was regarded as being a good life until yesterday. The tried and true is good because it's tried and true. It's your best bet. You don't want that life? Fair enough. I'm not trying to force it on you or anyone else. I'm reminding you it's one of your options if you want it enough to prioritize it and pay the price to make it happen. Like many people, I'm a fan of the Thomas Sowell quote, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs, and you try to get the best trade-off you can get. That's all you can hope for. I like that quote, not because it's how I would have things be, but since it is the way things are, and I can't change that, reminding myself of it is to remind myself of something that is true. It helps give me a perspective that is actually useful, as opposed to mere wishful thinking. You can choose to build communities. You can go to church or engage in offline social activities. You can choose to not allow your children to have smartphones. You can choose to exercise the self-control to limit your own time online. You could even go the Orthodox Jewish route and set aside one day a week in which you are entirely technology-free, a day that you devote to family instead. If you don't want to do that, you can compromise by setting aside a couple of nights a week that are technology-free as family time. You can choose to prioritize and foster family bonds, community bonds, and societal bonds. You don't have to. You can keep the life you have right now. No one's going to take it away from you. But if you want to change, you can. It won't be easy. It will require sacrifices, self-control, discipline, hard work. If you have children, they probably won't like the changes. But you can make them if you want to. You can have a different life if you're willing to make it. I will leave you with a final Douglas Murray quote. The age of grievance is over. The age of grievance will be ended with an age of heroism and courage. And we should encourage that from everybody. If these other people who want to hold us all back and make us talk about things that are so banal and boring, like gender woo-woo, and I'm feeling non-binary, no, don't have the time for you. Get out of the way. Life's too serious. Get ready. In my opinion, feelings do matter. And we should all treat each other the way we want to be treated. That being said, we can no longer afford to use up so much of our limited collective time and energy on culture war issues that are of comparative insignificance. As long as someone is not being mistreated, whether or not they are being affirmed to the degree they would like to be, that cannot be a major societal priority. We have serious problems as individuals, as societies, and as an increasingly global world. There are only so many hours in a day, and we have to prioritize. And some things don't make the cut. I would encourage each of you to not make global issues the priority of your life. Societies may have to prioritize these issues, and participating in them as part of society is fine. But don't let them take over your life. You only get one. So focus on making it a good one. Focus on the day-to-day practicalities of building the life you want to live, on building the family you want to have, on being the change you want to see. If we all do that, the world will mostly sort itself out. Final thought before we end the podcast. Many people ask, who does these things? In regard to the murders that Billy Shemir did. Answer: those who fall within the dark triad. This is a triad of personality traits. One is narcissism. That's where people really believe that the rules don't apply to them. They're above them, above everything and everyone. They only care about things as they see them, from their own viewpoint. They think they're special. They're entitled. They really believe they are or should be above any criticism. This personality trait was named after the story of Narcissa, a deity who fell in love with their own reflection, so much so that they couldn't even tear themselves away to eat, and they starved to death. Then there's psychopathy. These are people who don't have any empathy. They are not able to stand in someone else's shoes. They aren't even capable of asking themselves, what does this mean for others or to others? How will this affect their family? They want what they want, and they're willing to do literally anything to get it. But contrary to a common misconception, they are not socially awkward. I don't know where this misconception came from, but I've come across several people who have this mistaken idea. On the contrary, sociopaths are exceptionally gifted at being able to be all things to all people. They are able to evaluate what you want them to be and to pretend to be that in very convincing ways. They blend in like snakes in the grass. The third trait is Machiavellian, named after Niccolo Machiavelli. It's a dark, homicidal urge for power, without any willingness, ability, or even desire to curb or push down their own appetites. Jordan Peterson now adds sadism to the dark triad traits. That's when somebody gets actual pleasure, even gratification, from inflicting pain on someone else. Someone who falls within the dark triad is someone who has crossed the line from a mental illness into actual evil. It's a scientific fact of research and statistics that people within this triad are unreformable. They cannot be rehabilitated. There is something missing in them. When you put them into therapy or treatment, they don't get better. Sometimes they are motivated to fool even a trained therapist, but having done so, they reveal the behavior that never actually changed. These terms, narcissist, sociopath, get thrown around a lot. But if you know someone who truly does fall into these categories, you need to get away from them. I speak from experience. It won't change or even improve. They can't. Christianity, morality, and kindness are often confused for a, quote, giving people the benefit of the doubt mentality. That mentality is unhealthy and, frankly, insane. You don't give people the benefit of the doubt. You don't ignore or doubt evidence that is right in front of your eyes in favor of wishful thinking. That doesn't mean you assume the worst of people, but you systematically and unbiasedly collect data. You don't discount or cherry pick any of it until you have enough information to make an informed decision based on a hopefully accurate conclusion. But people shouldn't start out from a position of giving strangers the, quote, benefit of the doubt, any more than they would start out assuming they were serial killers. Those are statuses that have to be earned first. If the information you collect is sending up red flags and deep in your bones, you know this doesn't feel right, that the stories you are being told don't sound right, don't add up, you should not ignore that instinct. It's not infallible, but it is usually right more often than it's wrong. When someone shows you repeatedly who they are, believe them and act accordingly. Thank you for listening. I look forward to speaking with you next week.